I came across a really interesting fact about the Mars Curiosity rover, which NASA built, and that it's the most complex machine they've ever sent to another planet. But the computer that operates it is no more powerful than the one that's in your pocket, and that is your smartphone. With that power at the touch of your fingertips, you could argue that we're depriving pupils of the most powerful learning tool they've ever had access to.
Inspiration for Teachers podcast, bringing you dynamic and inspirational educator interviews. Our fascinating guests share their professional challenges and creative resolutions for success. Discover their workable strategies, ideas, and resources to reach your educational goals. And now your host, Kelly Long.
Hi Dawn, and welcome to the Inspiration for Teachers podcast show. You're going to be sharing with us today a very big challenge that lots of teachers and schools face, and that is concerning the use of mobile phones and technology in the classroom. But before we get onto that and some of those challenges and your ideas and solutions to those, could you start off by telling our listeners a little about who you are?
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me on. My name is Dawn Casey-Rowe, and I'm teaching at a regional vocational and technical school in Rhode Island, the United States. I've been teaching for 14 years, and before that, I had a career in corporate America and decided that I needed a change. So I went back to school for history and decided to teach.
So because we like to find out about what makes you excited about education and what you're passionate about, can you tell us what specifically lights you up about being a teacher, or what excites you right now about the educational sector?
So when I went to school to teach, I had this image. I had, that image of every single movie you've ever seen, and Welcome Back, Kotter, and all these students who really hate school. And I wanted to be the one to be able to say, you know what, school is great. I love school, and it's amazing, and you're going to love it too if we can just do it this way. And so that brought me in. And that's still what excites me. I mean, it's a different landscape today than it was when I entered even, but when you look at a kid and they say, wow, well, that's going to help me, or I can use that in my job, or thanks, I didn't know that job existed. Those are the things that I really aim to focus in on.
And when you said just do it this way, what was your view on just doing it that way?
Back in the day, they put you in a classroom. You walked into the classroom and maybe there was a book, maybe there wasn't a book. I did have this old textbook that I used for the first courses I taught. And they left you alone. That was it. And they said things like, hey, if you need me, I'm down the hall, or ask me anything you need. But really, it was a very independent course of action. You know, it was assumed that I was going to be the professional teaching these students something, and it would be in this subject area because that was my schedule. And there was not a lot of standardization or collaboration or, high stakes testing at the time. We were just started to get into the national curricula and standards and things. So that was when I started. Now it's a little bit different because we're really required to do a lot more accountability measures, high stakes testing, high stakes teacher evaluation. If there's one section of a course, it should be taught the same or similarly across course sections. So there really isn't that ability to say, hey kids, what do you want to learn, or what interests you, and kind of morph the course for them. So a lot of that has to be done creatively outside the spectrum and outside the normal course area.
So in your opinion, do you feel that we're in a better position now, or was it better back in the day?
That's really difficult to say because you've got people all over the map on that. Is it bad to have a set of standards? I don't think so. To have them so high stakes that people are pulling their students from school, or people are, either leaving the profession over the high stakes evaluations, or kids are losing weeks of time over testing. That to me is the negative side. But having things to shoot for, say a benchmark saying we'd really like them to know this math or connect this literacy standard with a career goal. Those things are pretty helpful.
So now that we've established what you're woohoo about in education, we're going to kind of transition on slightly, and you may have touched on it just then, about what would you most like to change about education or teaching, and why. And if that's not been possible, why do you think that is?
So this might just be me, but I think there's a couple of movements out there. I would really love to switch some of the high stakes testing and evaluations to formative evaluations or collaborative evaluations. For the student side, I'd love to say, I don't object to a test. I just object to the pressure that it puts on little kids, or even high school kids, regarding graduation or even advancement to the next grade in the case like a Florida state test. So I'd love to be able to take those measures, and we do have the technology to test formatively and just say, well, this student is at this level. We need him to get up to this level, and this test has shown that, rather than have it be something that affect the teacher's rating or affect a student's ability to advance. So that's too high pressure. As far as teacher evaluations, when we first got them, I thought that it would be a real collaborative event, and we would sit there and we'd have, coffee and feedback, and it would just be an amazing, party. And that's really not what happened. It became for us in Rhode Island, it became a situation where, our skills would be checked off on rubrics, but they were still pretty subjective depending on the evaluator. Some evaluators were great about giving feedback and having that collaboration, some not so much. And to me, it was just, there were situations where it became so high pressure. I felt that I wondered if teaching were still for me. So I'd like to take away some of that kind of pressure and maybe sit in other people's classrooms or have, partners or people that we work with or professional development outside of the classroom independently. To some extent, I think you see that emerging in Twitter chats, in ed camps we have around here, where people just meet on a Saturday and they put the agenda up, and anybody can teach anything and anybody can direct any learning, and people get together over things that they need to learn. And I think that those types of experiences are helpful for teachers and to really advance the profession to where we need to go.
It's really interesting that you say that, because it comes up so frequently that teachers find it a really awkward and difficult process of being observed and having that feedback given to them, because it's not always done in a very positive light, and people tend to dwell on the critical aspect of what's not going right and how it's going wrong. And it was really interesting in Jason Borton's episode, who was on quite recently. He said that in his school he was encouraging a partnership approach to lesson observation. So a teacher would be performing, that sounds awful, doesn't it, performing? A teacher would be giving a lesson, and there would be a mentor and a mentee, and they would be observing the lesson together and discussing what was going right in the lesson. So it wasn't the mentee that was teaching the lesson. There was very much a discussion and a coaching experience, as opposed to, right, you stand up there, you deliver this lesson, and I'm going to comment on what you're doing wrong. And I think that's a really nice approach. And also what you said about people getting together and collaborating and sharing ideas. There's so much knowledge out there. It's really powerful that people can do that. And I think you're right, we need to go more that way.
And I agree with that, because whether it's a mentor or mentee or a pair of people, there's been situations where I've looked to somebody else for something I needed. I am not as, I can connect the dots, I can integrate curricula, but there's things that, classroom systems that people just really do well. So whether or not I could share some of my gifts with somebody and they can share some to me, is helpful. But to take that fear out of the system is the only way really to get people to authentically open up. Right now, people are not opening up about their deficits or areas of opportunity because they're afraid it's going to be checked off on a box somewhere down the line. So to get that open spirit, it has to be a collaboration that's authentic, that's something that each teacher wants to learn, and that's truly, in the best interest of the classroom, rather than, oh my God, I need to get a 3 or a 4 on this rubric. That creates fear. And I've written about this, but my undergraduate degree was Russian history. And so education reform started to feel very cumbersome, like a 5-year plan where everybody was inflating or moving the numbers around to make sure that they did all right. And the opposite of that is that collaborative spirit where you really recognize the talents of everybody around you and kind of tap into their skills. A team approach, but maybe you're not teaching as a team, but you can still always learn something from every person around.
That comes back to that excellent quote by Jim Rohn where he says, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think that's true for teaching. Like you said, you've got gifts and talents, which I'm going to ask you to share with me in a second. But, you're not going to be good at everything. So you need that input, but in a positive way. So let's go to what gifts you think you have as a teacher, Dawn.
For me, I think I have always had the gift of relationships and empathy. I feel like I can relate to my students. I'm a high school teacher, so it's a little bit easier than maybe if you were a second grade teacher. I get to have those real relationships with the students. They find me in social media after graduation, so I can maintain those relationships as a person. And so they'll see me as a person, and I'll be able to explain my life situations to them so that they can understand why I need them to learn the skills. So I think relationship building with students is a very important thing, but also I'm willing to accept their talents and accept their help for me. I was having a girl help me with some marketing stuff she did boxes and designs, and it was really, really nice. I had another student help me with YouTube editing, and just I have resources with them too. So when they realize that learning is continuous and when it's a cycle, that's helpful. A couple of other things I think are helpful are, I've got a pretty diverse background, and in the classroom, that's great because I feel like I have a story for them about a great many things. I've worked in corporate, I've worked in tech, I've owned a business, I do a lot of fitness, cooking, just strange things that the students key in on and they can connect with other things.
I think that's really powerful because I think a lot of student teachers go straight from university into doing a PGC, maybe then doing a master's, and then they go boom, straight into the classroom. And they're very good at their subject knowledge, but trying to relate it, and I like that word that you said, storytell, that's a really powerful way of engaging your pupils, and the fact that you've got that background and that experience, it's only going to help them, isn't it?
I think so. And I like storytelling is very interesting because I don't feel like if you approach education from a teaching perspective, that's one person giving knowledge to another person who may or may not want that knowledge. But if you look at it as marketing and say, well, you know what, I'm selling you something and here's why you want to buy this product, and you package it that way, you're excited about what you're selling. I mean, nobody is more excited about those dead people from the Middle Ages or whatever that is. If I'm not excited about that particular unit and I show them how that relates to their life, and it's not just a bunch of pages in a book that they're not interested in, they buy it. And so really that's important to tell the story every minute, and it can be done in any subject. So I think I agree with you.
I think the why is so important. So yeah, we're on the same page there. So that brings us on to your professional challenge that you're going to share with us. So can we start there about what was that challenge? And you can do that in a storytelling way, so you're selling it to us, Dawn.
Sure. I think it was technology that we agreed was the largest, or one of the largest things that we need to tackle and get on the same page about. Some schools have so much technology and so much funding, and other schools have a desert out there. And there are even some schools in the middle who have technology but no permission to use it. And so when I started this journey to really develop myself, it was a student. He embarrassed me, and he said, well, miss, why can't we use our phones? And all he wanted to do was take a picture of the notes on the board. And that's my entire vision of educational technology, was students using their smartphones to take pictures of my notes on the board so they'd have them for later. I had no other vision. I didn't know the word ed tech. I knew nothing. But he kept on bothering me. He said, well, why can't we? I said, well, because we have a rule. Well, I think it's a dumb rule, he said. I said, well, I agree, but they told me I have to take your phones and you're not allowed to have the phones. So as I moved forward, I decided I needed to go on a journey and a quest to figure out why we couldn't have phones. So I asked everybody, I interviewed anybody I could, and most of the educational leadership in the region said things like, well, they could do bad things. And I questioned that because, we did bad things too. We would draw pictures of teachers we didn't like. We would, cut class. We all had these little things in high school that we might have done that were not good. And hopefully we learned and became better while they were just doing it digitally. So my thought was, well, we need to teach them how to do the right thing. And they have these things in their hand that are more powerful than my first computer. Why can't they use them? They can collaborate. They can do all these things. So as I started to learn about education technology, I connected with a few people, and I was looking for people who didn't have any money and who were allowed to use to let their students use phones or get some computers in the classroom. And what I came up with was entirely different. It was the entire educational technology world. And that's how I started the journey into this direction.
I was really interested to hear you say about you were questioning everything, because I think that's really interesting point to how we evolve our education system. We have to question why, and that's the clever thing about children. You can't pull the wool over their eyes. They'll keep pushing you for a good answer and they'll challenge us. So let's go to how you solved that challenge.
Well, I think it's a challenge in motion. So for me, I reconnected with a friend of mine who's an author, and he said, well, I'll be happy to introduce you to, I know a lot of people in education technology. I'll be happy to introduce you to somebody in ed tech. And I didn't realize that that was a big deal. I said, oh, okay, great. So I thought I would be meeting people who taught without budgets and computers. And he introduced me to a friend of his, Farb Nivi, who had just founded Learnist. And Learnist it was a platform where you could put your education, your material on there. It could be about anything, and it should teach somebody about something. And in the beginning, it was really heavily oriented toward education technology. And I looked at it and I immediately loved it. And I said, well, that's fantastic. So here's this platform that's mobile and it's also desktop, and I can build my content in it, and then I'll be able to share it with students, and they don't need to have it in the classroom. They could do it at home, and that's just great. And so I started just doing that, putting my things online and working in that way. And I ended up working for the company because I just really felt passionate about that. And then from my time at Learnist, doing some work in organizations in Rhode Island where we were trying to get education technology in all the classrooms, trying to kind of equalize it out. There was also a situation where a lot of entrepreneurs don't know exactly what should be created for the classroom. So we grew a group in Rhode Island, sponsored by the Highlander Institute, that was called EdTech Rhode Island. And entrepreneurs would come, and educators would come, and we would say things like, well, that's a fantastic platform, but here's how I'd use it, or this wouldn't be helpful. So the entrepreneurs wouldn't waste a lot of time and money. They'd be able to build better technology, and teachers would, in effect, be at the first stages of getting what they wanted and being able to test that. So that was helpful for a lot of people. At my own school, it just really was a situation where I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere, and I didn't feel like we were going to be able to get phones in the classroom. And then all of a sudden, there was a colleague of mine who had received some grants through the Harvard Summer Institute for Technology. So she got a one-to-one Chromebook lab, and she was working with that for a year. But still, that meant that one classroom had a lot of technology, and the rest of us really didn't. So we were able to kind of sit down and go through and make a responsible use policy and get people that were uncomfortable with technology to buy into the fact that, you know what, we need to teach them how to use it. I have stories of students misusing the technology and how we kind of re-educate them. But we need to start that at a young age, because these guys have tech. They've had it since they were my 7-year-old son's age. They don't know a world without it. And the only time they are without it is when they come to school and we take it away. So just teaching them that process to get the better jobs was important. So that's how we started to convince, at least our region in school and our kind of our state one by one, and then get those schools on board. It was important.
Okay, so I'm going to work you backwards now and start with that policy that you created. What went into that policy in terms of what were the key things that you put into it that made mobile phone technology and the use of them work properly in your school? And off the back of that as well, how did you get that buy-in? How did you get people that probably are a bit anti-technology in their classroom? How did you get them to buy into that?
Well, I think it's fair, because it's a fair argument for somebody who's not comfortable with technology. Well, they'll cheat on your test. I've had kids do that. Well, miss, he's cheating on your test with that phone. And so I'll give you an essay test. I'll get around that, or I'll make you research it, or, so something. There's always a way to get around improper technology use, but it's still an area where people are not comfortable. Are they going to be recorded? How do we handle these things? And the only way we can really get comfortable is A, by using it, and B, by having a solid policy that kind of spells out what happens in a given situation. So in my view, you only need one policy, and it fits every single person in the school family. And it's called a responsible use policy. So if you're doing this, it's responsible for you. And whether you're a student, that would be your where you can use your technology. If you're a teacher, this can be where you would use your technology. It's not the same for everybody, but everybody has their degree of responsibility. And so teaching and understanding that and writing that into the policy makes a lot of people hesitant. Also, not hesitant. But also the second thing is, for me, even if we wrote a solid policy and we had a responsible use mentality and kind of a positive outlook on technology, I didn't want anybody to feel threatened that they had to use technology. I think because that kills it in a lot of situations. If somebody's comfortable teaching in a traditional manner and it's working for them, I don't feel that they should be forced to let everybody have cell phones. And so bringing those types of conversations to the table to say, listen, just give me permission, or give whoever wants to have that permission to use these things for education, and then not make other people feel threatened.
So then if you've got the teachers that are using it, is there anything in place for them to roll out and teach it to the teachers that don't want to use it? So you might have really good practice going on in one classroom. Is there anything in place to transition it over to those that probably don't know how to use it, but might be willing to give it a go if they can see it in action?
We've got a couple of things at our school that are working really, really well. We have one teacher who put together a fantastic tech presentation. She teaches at Providence College as well. So she really has some skills getting those things across. And she put together things for video, for Google Classroom, for, anything really that you might use, formative assessment tools. And so she'll do seminars over a series of time with faculty, and a lot of faculty have already gone. For the faculty that say, well, that's way too much, I don't want to use those, I just want to use these, there's some one-to-one instruction going on where we just in the hallway saying, hey, I'm using this, what are you using? And just kind of spreading the word grassroots style. So I think in a lot of cases that's really the way that I learn. I'll go and say, well, I'd like to learn that. Can you show me? And I think other people feel the same way about learning, just kind of chunking up the learning like we would in a classroom and learning one thing at a time and then putting it into practice. So we have both opportunities at our school.
That's such a good way to avoid that resistance to change, which I think a lot of people dig their heels in when they think, oh no, something else is coming on my plate, something else I've got to learn to use, and then they just start freaking out and they dig their heels in, and it's like, no. But I just want to take you back a little bit, because you said two other points that are really interesting I'd like to go back to. You said that you were working with entrepreneurs in the local city to discuss how they could transition what they're doing into the classroom. How did you facilitate that in a really positive way so that there's a nice bridge between what is going on with these entrepreneurs and the technology that they're using, and with how we teach and how we view things and how we know it's going to be delivered well and received well in the classroom?
So that is really an interesting question, because it was a small group. There was a very small group called the Ed Underground in Rhode Island. And from that group, and the Ed Underground was just a group of teachers who wanted to learn about technology and wanted to learn from each other. And there was just a very small Department of Education grant when it came out, facilitated by a man named Sean Rubin, and through the Highlander Institute, which is an organization that started as a blended learning tech kind of adaptive learning for special needs and things, and just really grew into a national force in ed tech. So it started with that little group, and then there was a specific subset of people who were interested in the development and beta testing of ed tech software. And there were enough entrepreneurs in the region, because we're in Rhode Island, so we're kind of nestled between the Boston people and the New York people, both of which have either innovation zones or accelerators or people trying to work on these problems. So we started having just meetups at local establishments, and we would get there and introduce ourselves and look at 5 or 6 products over the course of a night. And then it just grew and grew. So the organization became bigger. We've done, Skype conferences. We've looked at products independently. So that group really grew, and a bunch of us just, kept taking part in those experiences, because without having that feedback, I find a lot of the EdTech entrepreneurs who have not been in a classroom have fantastic skills. They have great platforms that they're building, but there might just be one or two small tweaks that make a difference between a product selling and being helpful and a product falling flat entirely. I looked at one product that would have, it ended up being a fantastic product. But in the beginning, I said, well, congratulations, nobody can use you. And the entrepreneur said, why? I said, well, you have a Facebook login and no school accesses Facebook. So we wouldn't be able to sign our students on. We wouldn't be able to sign on, and you wouldn't have access to really any of the logins that you need at school. And so that product put in an email login, and it was just amazing. So they're just small things like that that are really helpful. And I think that the entrepreneurs want that feedback. It's really difficult to get access to classrooms and teachers. So to have groups in place that are willing to do that is amazing for them too.
I think we really need to have a strong bridge between what is going on in industry and what we are doing in the classroom, because there's two industries with massive knowledge and we just need to bring it together, because from the UK we're always hearing that children leave our classrooms and they don't have the skills that employers want. So to be able to have that in place, I think it's really powerful.
No, I agree too, because when you have a chance to either show students, well, here, this is how these things get built. You could build a game or you could do this. That gets them intrinsically motivated to work on the back end skills that they're going to need to get to those points, whether their interests stay with them or they, redevelop them. That's not the point. The point is that, maybe they don't want to swallow a math book, but they do want to swallow a math book if it means a profitable business. Or, I've had students build businesses that made more than, at least what I was making while they were in school. So they'll do accounting or math then. And so putting those things together is really helpful for them in building those skills.
And I'm just going to take you back one more step. You've probably forgot that you even said this point, but it's a really interesting one. And I think a lot of schools get a bit overwhelmed with it because they do have these pots of money if they're lucky enough to invest in technology, but there is so much technology out there. How would you recommend a school approach the type of technology out there and decide what is best for them?
That is a fantastic question that I've talked to a bunch of education leaders regarding. I feel like there's a lot of technology graveyards out there that people are really well-meaning and they sink money into technology, and either they don't have the infrastructure or they don't have the personnel or finances to keep it up. So then you end up with a bunch of really, really old computers with, those old monitors and things that nobody can use. Or you have all these, platforms and things on the school libraries and things that the students aren't interested. And so what I'll usually recommend is get the students and the faculty and say, what do you want to use, or what things do you want to tackle or accomplish with your technology? And then you can research from there. You can get the buy-in before you spend the dollars on it. And also you can really understand that there is a ton of education technology out there that doesn't cost anything. When I started my journey, I was using Learnist, which was free. I was writing a WordPress blog for my classroom, which is free. Well, it was, $30 to keep the ads off, but for all intents and purposes, it was pretty minimal. And then I transitioned that content onto Google Classroom, which is free and now mobile. So if you're looking at, accomplishing certain things, you may need to pay for, formative assessment tools or data trackers or things that you need on a school level, or certainly, grade books and things. But for the day-to-day pieces of student technology, or look at what students use. They're using Instagram. Okay, well, how can I make Instagram educational? Or if they're on Twitter, how can I use that? Meet them where they are, which is generally somewhere free because, students are broke and teachers are broke. So that's what I usually recommend.
That's such good advice. I mean, it's even simple things like using Facebook. I mean, everybody is on Facebook. All the kids are on Facebook. Their parents are on Facebook. And yet lots of schools are really fearful of using it. And yet it could be such a powerful way of communicating with your stakeholders.
Oh, absolutely. And that brings me on to another thing that we can solve. If you look around, I mean, you can't go to the grocery store and pick up a product that's not well branded. If you have a soda, you know what that soda is. If you have your breakfast cereal, you know exactly what's in that box. But we don't really have that condition for schools. And if you were to say, allow a Facebook page and have somebody really good updating the sports events or the community events or parent nights and things, and have an engaging conversation or to really kind of build a school Twitter, you allow the parents a voice, you allow the students a voice, you put everybody together so that everybody can see what's going on. And I think it's so much more effective, because when you create a brand for your school, what you're doing is you're telling the community this, you need to be proud of this school. And then the community down the road will support your efforts. They won't be angry at tax time, So there's all these benefits to creating a positive image. And it's very simple and easy to do if you can kind of get over that, oh my goodness, it's Facebook, and, or it's open and not secure, and who could see this tweet, and just assume that we're going to tweet positive things and teach the students to do the same.
You're so right. And the thing is, nowadays, schools are like the centre of a community. They are what, I don't know, in some cases, churches once were. Everybody comes through the school system. Everybody has that connection with education. So you need to make it a brand. You need to empower people and engage them. And it's just such an inspiring thing to do. And I think schools are a bit fearful of it.
And I think what's really important is, my stat is wrong on this, I can guarantee you, but I read somewhere that 30 to 40% of students report that they hate school. And if that's a significant, if that's the correct stat, but in any case, it's a large number. If you go around and just ask every kid who loves school, and you'll get one or two nerds like I was that have these positive memories, and the rest of them just, they don't want to be in classes. They don't want to do this. They feel, burdened. So if you start to rebrand the school and rebrand it as a place of excitement and innovation, and just, it might not be that way in the beginning. It might be some drudgery or things, but as you create this story and you create this image, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it really adds that level, that layer of positivity onto the experience. And I feel like if a lot of people did this, I know that Dan Pink writes about this as well. If a lot of people did this, it would really kind of change student outlook, parent outlook, community outlook. And right now, education is fairly contentious. So I think creating a new story and a positive story is important.
If you think it, you can make it happen. It just takes one person with that vision, and then you can bring everybody along. What we're going to do now is we're going to move into the inspiration round, so to get even more value out of you being on the show. So can we take it back to you, though? Let's flip it back to you, and let's go to what your proudest educational moment was.
My proudest educational moment is two girls came up to me recently and said, "Miss, can you look at my business plan?" And I said, "Absolutely." And they gave me a business plan that was better than some of the adult ones I've looked at. And they went out, they calculated their profit, and they're starting their business now. A couple others, same thing, where they get out there, they create, they do, they write, they put their things out there. Every time a student does that, I remember that that's exactly the objective, and they're going to be successful.
Let's give those students a little shout out if we can. So what is their business?
Well, I have one that was doing a K-pop dance, actually two of them. They wanted to teach Korean dance. And I said, "Is there a market for this?" And they said, "Well, yes, there is." And they handed me papers and research, and I went home and I did my due diligence, and I found, oh my goodness, they can do this. We determined they were actually undercharging by a great deal, and kind of put them in place. Another one was a student who pushed lawnmowers when he was little, and then by the time he was 16, he bought a beat up truck and started just getting better equipment. And I remember during the big market recession, we were having difficulties with our business, and we were sitting down in the cafeteria, and I was chatting with him about his business, and he was saying, "It's getting expensive. I need to sell a couple of my power boats." And I'm like, "A couple of your power boats?" And just having this conversation with him in a professional manner. And he said, "Yeah, and my employees, they're just, I don't know what to do with them." He'd hired a bunch of his friends. I said, "Well, you might have to fire them." And so to have a conversation, whereas I had, had situations where we'd had to hire and fire employees, and having this conversation with a 16, 17-year-old kid, it is just amazing. I love that. I would recreate that with every student if I could.
I love that entrepreneurial spirit. Kids have got that spark. They're really switched on. we need to encourage it some more, because entrepreneurs are the people that make the world change.
Oh, it is. And now that this kind of conversation is out in the open, I've been wondering about the price of college, because, I'm still paying mine off, and kids will look at me and say, really? Like how can you teach me? You're just not intelligent. You're still paying college. And so books, when you look at entrepreneurs like James Altucher, who's written Choose Yourself, and just a lot of the entrepreneurs out there are saying, well, wait a minute, you can't sell $300,000 worth of debt to kids. Teach them how to do something. And I've had that conversation with Kamal Ravikant, who got me started, and he was the person who said, you need to do this for real, and started me in writing. What these kinds of entrepreneurs are really trying to change the landscape for those types of students, and really talking to students and writing about these things, and making us wonder, well, is our national canon, is it exactly the right way to go? Or could we be teaching students to look outside the box and develop those skills?
Oh yeah, innovation. I think we should be teaching it all the time. It's how you evolve. It's how new ideas come about. And that's a skill, to think in an innovative and creative way. And I think too many people think in a competitive frame mind, and therefore that just narrows their vision.
Well, it's not only competitive, but it's linear. So first I go to elementary, then high school, then college, then I, go get a job, then I have my family, or whatever that vector is. But, that's not the way the world works anymore. And I just, for me, when my grandfather had, a job or two, he had his career and he retired, and my dad was in finance, and then he retired, but he got a retirement job, so he technically had two. I've had, multiple jobs and careers. And my students, it's estimated that students might have up to 7 careers, and not jobs. So it's not 7 restaurant jobs or 7 jobs in your field, but, shifting for that many careers, because, companies aren't hiring as many full-time employees. You really have to be able to make your way on your own. And that's critical. So in not teaching them how to do that, how to seize an opportunity, how to notice an opportunity, how to layer 2 or 3 talents on top of each other to create something that nobody else is doing, that's where I think education has a big opportunity to help these guys in the future.
I so agree with you, Dawn. I really do. Thank you so much for all of that value you've just shared with us, and we could talk about that for hours, I think.
Oh, I know. And that's the good part, is that really there's so much negativity and so many people throwing tomatoes at education. But when you just flip the question and say, well, what would be valuable to you? And especially in this environment where we literally can access the world at our fingertips, we have limitless opportunities if we can get that coordination.
So let's move on to the best advice you have ever received as a teacher.
I think the best advice was from Richard Martin, one of my student teacher mentors. He's just an amazing educator. He told me I wouldn't be able to teach everything I wanted to teach, and I asked him why. He said, aim for teaching 50% of what you think. And it's that old corporate adage that people will hear 8% of your speech. But it's true. It's that we go in there inspired to teach so much, and then we feel like we're failures when we can't teach all of that in 45 minutes when kids have other things going on in their lives as well. So I think Richard taught me how to slow down and really kind of assess, what are my key focal points, and it's okay if you didn't teach every single thing.
What are your personal sources of inspiration?
Mine, actually, I look at things outside of the education field, because I think it's very easy to just kind of only talk about education, and that limits your world outlook. So for me, I've been really inspired by just a lot of my friends who are just amazing authors, and they're doing things entrepreneurially. They're doing things in finance. They're doing things creating. They're doing things inspiring. Everybody from coaches to people building companies. So I really like to look at that. And I also like to look at the leadership world. And then it was interesting because just connecting that with things already in my life, those are things that inspire me. And then, making sure I take time for some hobbies and things I like too.
Those fall by the wayside, don't they? The older that you get.
Oh, they do. And just, and I think maybe you can relate to this too, is now that my son is in school, he's taught me a lot too. Well, mommy, why do we have to have homework, or why do we have to do this? And I look at his educational experience and I say, oh, I could do this better. And I do. So, I mean, he's got amazing teachers too, but just his little mind, he kind of, questions me, and I have to acknowledge that.
Okay, so let's move on now to a personal teaching habit that you have that works for you time and again, and you think other people could benefit from doing it your way.
I think flexibility is my go-to teaching habit, and maybe not everybody will agree, because I think there's some people out there who feel like deadlines and structure are important, because maybe the world will not be as forgiving as school. But for me, I feel like the spirit of learning is where I want to be. So I like to have plenty of personal conversations with students. I'd like to make sure I'm, having those personal conversations so I can then say, oh, here's a book you might like, or to direct their learning, or get them to learn a little bit extra when they don't realize they're doing it. And the flexibility, and now that we have technology to do that, they can, access me by email or get my attention other ways. It gives me that time that I might not have if it was only in the classroom. So really to extend that classroom a little bit deeper is helpful for me.
And the fact that there's so much technology out there and at your fingertips, this is a slight diversion from what we're talking about, but when we were growing up, if you had a learning difficulty, if you struggled with, say, literacy or numeracy, you were pretty much stuck as to how you could get over that barrier. But there's so much technology out there that can help you get over that. I mean, there are books that read to you, and, there are activities that you can do with numeracy that help you to work your way through a difficult situation. So that's really empowering.
And that actually can help a lot of people redefine a student, because once you get that learning disability or that label, it kind of puts you off to the side or in a box, or you'll be that kid that they pull from class. And I've gone to a lot of those meetings. One time I sat there and I'll bring my own notebooks, which are just horrendous, and say, look, I've survived, you can too. But one student, he programs, and he'll do anything from iPhone to a computer. And at his meeting, I said, well, man, you can't write. And he looked at me, whoa, because nobody says that in a meeting. I said, but here's the deal, is that you don't have to anymore, because you have Siri, or I've shown you how to dictate a paper and edit it and things. So look at your gifts and then use those. And that was at the time when we didn't really have the ability to use technology in the classroom. But now that we do, there's really no reason a student has to feel like he or she has a disability. It's just, I'm unique. I look at the world this way, and here's my amazing talent. So we can de-emphasize that and really help kind of bring those students together.
We really need to play to their strengths. That brings us on to a resource that you can share. And you've given us so many already, but if there was one resource that you were thinking as a teacher you would love to recommend, what would it be?
I would really hesitate to be able to recommend one. I've told you the ones that I used on my journey, but I think what I would say in this case is, look at your personality as an instructor, and what's your favorite thing? Do you find yourself on Twitter? Do you find yourself blogging or writing? I know now that even though I blog and write, and, I've been doing these things for a while, that students really don't want to read a whole bunch. They want to see videos. So now I find myself having to learn that skill. So, kind of access your audience, get to where your audience is, and then find out what you need to do to learn those things. So maybe online learning, maybe that would be the one resource. It's a bit generic, whether you do it by Google searches or Udemy or take a course, but I think maybe that would be it.
And can you tell us The Power of No?
Oh, that's actually an amazing book. So I mentioned James Altucher's book, Choose Yourself, but he and his wife Claudia wrote The Power of No, and this book was amazing. I knew I'd like it because they're good and they're friends, so I knew I would like it. But this book says, all the conditions in which you should say no to something or somebody in order to preserve time, or to make the emotional or spiritual space for a yes. And so as teachers, what we do is we give, and then we find that we really are kind of emotionally bankrupt in our own lives, and that's what leads to teacher burnout. So even though I expected to like this book was amazing, because it was so much better even than I had anticipated, because I thought, oh, well, thanks, I do that, or I need to improve that. I almost felt like it was a checklist of things directed at teachers or at me to stop wasting time on the silly things and to learn to be more assertive about preserving my time and saying no.
I think a lot of teachers suffer from that. 4 weeks into a term, we're all counting down to the half term where we can just have a break because we're also burnt out because we've given it our all. And there's just no downtime in teaching, is there? I mean, if you're having a bad day and you're feeling a bit ill, you can't go and hide behind your computer or hide and have a coffee somewhere. It's full on. So that sounds like a book that I'm going to be getting.
It's true. I mean, there's days where you don't get to the bathroom and you think of fundamental human rights, and that's one of them. But then what I did was I kind of took a step back and took I took a list of all the things, an inventory of the things I had been doing. And, I felt like, I kind of have felt like I'm not a rock star teacher anymore because, I'm a mom. I come home for my son. I'm doing these other things. And so therefore I'm not dedicating, all of my time into teaching. And I think a lot of us can relate to that experience. So with reading that book and just kind of sitting with myself, what that taught me was that, I really didn't have to do those things. Like I didn't have to coach. I didn't have to be the class advisor. I didn't have to do every committee and activity. What I had to do, and I resigned from those, what I had to do was really love my students. And when I did those things and when I continued learning, it kind of brought me more into my direction for me. And that's actually my other friend's book, Live Your Truth, was by Kamal Ravikant. It was a really amazing book for just learning how to take time and say, well, what should I be doing? What's my absolute truth? Or as opposed to what I feel the education system wants me to be, and to take time to create that and continue that learning for myself.
I think that's really going to resonate with so many of our listeners.
They're all amazing books. And then Claudia just came out. She's just becoming prolific with this book called How to Be an Idea Machine. And so she makes you write 10 ideas a day. And I thought, well, it's going to be a workbook on 10 ideas a day, but that's not what it is. It's actually reflections that she'll give you a scenario, and then you have to write the 10 ideas. And a lot of them are things from our lives that we actually should be thinking about anyway. So again, she brought another book about, how we can kind of expand our idea muscle as teachers and how we can teach our students to I always teach my students to do the same thing. So, that's a tool that's like a cartoon written on two levels. It's kind of like one for students and one for teachers as well.
Do you know what? That's really relevant because I'm really into TED Talks and I love them from a similar point of view that I'll sit there and I'll even watch things that have got nothing to do with my subject whatsoever. But I can guarantee at some point I will be bringing in that knowledge into my lessons, and it's just a different way of engaging your pupils and also expanding your mind. You need to keep growing as a teacher. If you ever get to a point where you say, that's it, I don't need to learn anything anymore, I think you need to leave because you'll always evolve and you'll always keep learning, and that's how it can keep it fresh.
And I think one thing that would be helpful now that we have the technology is, when you get your teaching degree, you're certified to teach whatever it is that you can teach. But then as a human, you keep learning. So, for example, I have an undergraduate degree in languages, and I'm certified. If I took one grammar course, I'd be certified to teach languages that I no longer speak. You would not want me teaching, your children these languages, but I can have dinner. But yeah, I'm right professionally, and I'm not certified to teach that. So I'd love to find a way that we could really capitalize and turn our learning into things that we would then be certified to teach, because that would go a long way in re-engaging teachers who might be getting a little bit bored.
Yes, such good advice, Dawn. Thank you. We're nearly at the end of the show. I just want to say from me, thank you so much for all of your knowledge and advice. I love having these conversations with other educators because I find that, it's a bit embarrassing, but I find that when I'm in a situation, I can hear your advice in my head and it's coaching me through what scenario I'm in. So thank you so much from me to you for giving us all that today. Just before we say goodbye, if our listeners want to connect with you and find out some more, how can they reach you?
I'm on Twitter, running DMC, and so they can start there, and then we can have a conversation, and I'd be happy to touch base on either Skype or email. That would be wonderful.
Thank you for joining us today on Inspiration for Teachers. For more resources, tips, and advice, visit our website, inspirationforteachers.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would love to connect with you. Just click like on our Facebook page at facebook.com/inspirationforteachers.